Hey guys, welcome back to Geek Blend. I'm Jeff,
Hey, I'm Jason.
and today we're going to be reviewing It Chapter 2. We return to Derry as the adults come back to face their fears in this sequel to It Chapter 1 that came out 2 years ago. Them all coming back together because of the pact they made. If it returned, they would have returned to stop it. When the credits first roll, what was your first initial thought of the movie?
Right off the bat, I was pretty much on the edge of my seat with anticipation, wanting to see like where they were gonna immediately take this movie, in what direction. You know, we started off with the kids. I kind of had my own kind of way that I thought the movie was going to play out. It definitely went in a total different direction than I anticipated, which is what I liked and what I loved about it. But really, I thought at first we were going to just dive right in to maybe them as adults, you know, immediately starting to come together. I thought that kind of took a little bit longer than it should have. I felt maybe at times getting them kind of on the same page, but further on down the line, it kind of played into the storyline, which is what it all started to make sense. But me being the person, I never read the books.
Okay.
I really didn't. I'm sorry. I never really got too much into Stephen King, but I remember watching the show, you know, when it originally aired back in the 90s, you know, late 80s, early 90s, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Because I would have been about a teenager about then, and I remember the hype and everything surrounding it. I really felt like at times the movie it moved kind of slowly. They were probably proving a point, and I'm sure you'll be able to kind of dive more into if it followed the book or not. But I mean, for how long the movie was and things of that nature, I really felt like, me personally, it could have, to keep me interested and me wanting to watch more of this movie, there could have been some parts where they could have kind of trimmed it down. But when listening to you explain things and how it followed with the storyline of the book, then I was kind of like, oh, well, now it makes sense why this was so stretched out and why this movie did go on for as long as it did. I feel like maybe now, like, going back and reading the books to kind of compare the two would be a smart move, just because I did enjoy both movies. I've heard both positive and negative, you know, reviews from many people online, just speaking with friends, things like that. I never ever, you know, we never try to let any of that influence us here on this channel. It's kind of like we form our own opinions and things of that nature. But at the same time, like, I do listen, and I love to hear what everybody else's thoughts are. Yeah. But at the same time, like, man, just the scare tactics and the way I felt like this movie was put together, as far as like a way to like creep you out, it was up there. I mean, with some of my favorite horror movies, and I'm not a big horror genre. You, on the other hand, are like, you know, you love being immersed in these horror movies, and me, I can take them or leave them for what they are. If you can make a good horror movie that's going to keep me interested for damn near 3 hours, I have to give you props on that. You know, I have to applaud that, because if you would ever tell me, you know, hey, we're going to be sitting through a horror movie for almost 3 hours, I probably would have been like, you might want to...
No thanks.
Yeah, no thanks, man. But I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was entertaining as hell. I loved every scare, every form that it took. Pennywise himself, just little things like that, in the way like he was able to like just completely screw with everyone's minds. It was awesome. Yeah, I do have to say, there was just certain things about this movie that really creeped me out, and I can tell when we went and watched this with my wife. It's not too often that she's covering her eyes and things of that nature, and I think she spent probably about a little over half the movie with her eyes closed, covering her eyes, tucking her head down into some form of either my arm or her seat or something like that. So I knew right then and there, like, this movie had something, and it wasn't like a lot of these movies today. They pride themselves on this. They get you to jump because you don't see that scare coming. This was like, it kept you on the edge of the seat because you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming, but you're just like, when?
Yeah.
Like, when are they going to do it? And sometimes they stretched it out so long, like the scene when he was pulling the balloon out from underneath the bed.
Yeah.
And you're just like, eventually you're like, for the love of God, just get on with the scare. I know it's going to happen. And certain little, like, just things like that, they were pulling at my strings the whole movie, and it's almost like frustrating in a sense. Now, like, looking back on it, it's probably one of my favorite parts of the movie. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. I really enjoyed it as well. Scare-wise, I definitely know what you mean. There were definitely some scares in this that, like, they drug it out. They built it up for a little bit longer, but it was more effective, I think, especially when Beverly went back to her old apartment. Spoilers, by the way. There'll be some spoilers coming. I'll put some warnings in the beginning, but we're going to probably not spoil everything, just a few little things here and there, but if we do get into it, warning from now on, there's spoilers coming. But like when Beverly went back to her old apartment and that whole build-up in that, with what happened there, I mean, it was in the first teaser trailer, like part of it, but that whole build-up there was one of the reasons I like some of these movies, because there's some scary movies that they're going to scare you, they're going to give you a jump scare, but they're going to show you where it's coming from, and it's going to be uninteresting, and you're like, okay, that's fine, whatever. And oh, yeah, it's scary. It came from right there because you told me it was coming from there.
Right.
This one showed you mostly where it was coming from, but it did it in a way to get you to, I don't know, like lean forward, expecting it, and like, okay, what's happening? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I saw you do it a couple times too, where you're like, okay, the scares come in, you kind of lean forward, like, okay, where's it coming from? Or you kind of look away because you're not like, I don't want to jump on this one because if it gets me, whatever. But yeah, it did it effective, and this movie was a good, scary movie, but it wasn't like the scariest movie I've seen in a long time, and it did the scares well. It was more about the characters and them coming together as adults, but what they did with the scares worked when they had to do them. And then, of course, it did follow the book for a lot of it, and some of it didn't. It's been a long time since I read the book, and the book is like an encyclopedia size book. But
one of the reasons why I've never read the book.
It was one of the first adult books I read. I think it was 7th or 8th grade, maybe 6th or 7th grade when I read it. It was one of the first big adult books. Actually, I think The Stand was before that, but then This is still probably my favorite Stephen King book out of all of them. And I stopped reading after a certain time. I didn't get into the Dark Tower, didn't get into some of that. But yeah, this is still my favorite Stephen King book. It's very effective how they did it. It worked on every level. It was a long movie, but it didn't feel long. I didn't feel like I was sitting there for 3 hours. I didn't get to the point where I was like, yeah, is this going to end? Like some movies nowadays, they're less than 3 hours that make you feel like, is this going to end? And that didn't ever make me feel like that, which was great. I was expecting at least 1 or 2 points in the movie to be like, okay, can we get this going a little bit? And I understand what you mean by there's a little bit of a build-up and it takes a little bit longer to get to a few things, but I think that the way they did it, the way they got the characters back together, with Mike calling every single character to like, hey, it's back, we got it, you honor the pact we made. Honor the pact we made to come back to Derry and take it on once and for all, to get rid of it if it comes back. And the way they did it and the way they got everybody back together, it worked, and everybody had their own thing to get them back. Then they were all going to leave, but then something happened to get them to stay, and yeah. But I think it worked really well. One of the biggest things I like about this movie was the adult actors. Like your wife said when we were leaving, you knew who they were before they said who they were.
You could have literally shown me 10 minutes of the first movie and 10 minutes of the second one, and I could have put face by face which actor went along with that child actor in those movies. That's how well they casted this, as far as making these kids look like their counterparts as adults in the second part.
Yeah.
it almost didn't seem real. It almost seemed like at times you were looking at these adult actors and you were like, man, did they CGI these actors to look like children? In the first one, it messes with your mind. I mean,
do they go back in time and get these people as adults and bring them in to play these roles? I mean,
absolute wild. I mean, but that's what just adds to the realistic aspect of this movie as far as making it feel like you are watching these events happen 27 years later.
Yeah. There
was just so many positive things as far as that I loved. I know you were talking about, once again, the length of the movie, and I do recall, I think the first probably 2 hours flew by in that movie. Like,
yeah,
honestly,
I
don't really feel like those first 2 hours lasted exactly 2 hours. The end for me felt a little stretched. That final battle scene with Pennywise, it just kind of kept going and going. That was the only time during the entire movie where I was like, kill him and get this over with. You know, you've seen these kids and as adults go through so much hell and torture, and this entity, or, you know, this eater of worlds just absolutely, you know, just run them through the ringer and torture them for years. And now, like, you get to that point where you're just like, damn it, kill it, just get it over with. That was the only point, and I don't know if it was, you know, because of the time, you know, we went and seen it late, and it was getting late, and my old ass was getting grumpy. I hate using things like that to kind of review and give my outlook on a movie, because I really just thoroughly enjoyed the first one. I thought it was great, and this one was right up there with it just as well. Just so many little details in the movie. It just kind of makes you feel so immersed in it that you honestly, like, you do lose track of time and realize how fast those hours are just flying by, because you're just like, you're there with those people, and you're there in those situations. Yeah. Those are the kind of movies I really like, and you don't get that with a lot of horror movies, I feel like, now, especially nowadays. This was, man, it was so mentally just breaking you down as far as with the scares and the way these things came at you. Like we discussed too with the old woman scene. I hate with how trailers and things are done today, because I feel like a lot of the movies are given away before you even go get to see them. Me personally, one of my favorite things to do is see trailers. So going and watching a movie and then getting, you know, this extra added bonus to have a trailer kind of sprung on you was one of my favorite things when I went to go see movies. Now that joy, I feel, is taken away from us these days, but that's just the way things are done today as far as promoting and things of that nature. Yeah. The scene with the old woman was so eerie and creepy and impactful. I felt like it was one of the strongest moments in the movie as far as just creeping you the hell out. And that was the first trailer. That was the very first trailer we got when they were springing this next movie, this second chapter on us. And it probably got a lot of people wanting and excited to see the movie. But for me, I felt like a lot was taken away from me seeing it in the moment during the movie. I knew what was coming. Now, there was some added extras that they put in the movie that you didn't see in the trailer. And then the actual scare moment was probably one of the creepiest parts of the movie. I don't know why. Maybe for me, I know it freaked the hell out of my wife, because I saw just out of the corner of my eye, she wouldn't even look at the screen. So I knew right then and there that was probably one of the scariest parts of the movie as far as like leading up to where we were at that point. But, you know, like I said, it really, that was the part where I just kind of was sitting there the whole time, and I was like, damn it, this could have just been sprung on all of us in this moment, and you never would have known what to expect. Yeah. With just the way the woman actor and her just dead face,
that was creepy,
smiling, pause, eye twitching, just every bit of it just creeped me the hell out. And it would have been so much more impactful if I wouldn't have seen that months ago in the trailer. There's no real negative things that I could probably say. They're just little bitty things here and there.
Little tiny nitpicks and here and
exactly,
there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I don't have a lot of negative aspects of the movie. I thought the length was good because they included a lot more in this movie, of course, than they could in the miniseries back in the late 80s, early 90s that they did. They could just fit a lot more in it. There was a few things that they didn't have character moment wise that were in the book a little bit more with a couple of characters, but it worked well with the time they gave it, and they let it grow. It felt almost natural the way the movie flowed. I know some people might say it did drag. I've seen some reviews, people say it was dragging on, and I was like, oh, hope that doesn't happen. It didn't have a pacing issue for me. I never felt like, okay, let's get going. With the end scene, the final battle with Pennywise, like I said, I haven't read the book in a long time, but certain things kind of started to come back to me a little bit, and I started to remember a little bit more about the book. It did have more aspects of the final battle, and I was glad to see that, and I'm glad we got to see them kind of bond and build together more. It was just about them having to struggle and fight through this hell, this torture, like you said, this crap they've had to deal with this entity, this Eater of Worlds, this other dimensional being that they've had to deal with, and now they're continuously overcoming odds and coming together, working together to finish him off, because it was about them being together, not alone. It was them being together. That's how they defeated him the first time. That's how they were going to do it this time, and it just worked really well. There was these moments where they, like when Ben and Beverly were separated. She was in the bathroom stall. He was in the underground thing, and they were both, and they connected because they were trying to reach out to each other, and it worked. That was a great scene.
That was a really good scene.
It really worked well.
Yeah.
Especially those characters and their history and their backstory with the poem from the first film and when they were kids and her not knowing it was him and that realization, and it just worked really well. The actors in this movie, like James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, who plays Beverly. I don't know the actors' names who plays Ben or Mike, but then Bill Hader, who plays he was incredible in this movie. Like, absolutely amazing in this movie. And like I've seen the reviews, people say online that he stole every scene he was in, and he damn right he did.
Yeah.
He just nailed everything. I mean, all of them did, but he just stood out a little bit more in a cast of people who stood out all over the board. He stood out a little bit more. Everything he was in, he hit every mark. And it worked really well for me. It just everything they did, those characters mesh when they would go back to the kids, back to the adults. Everything just worked. It just seemed to work really well. It was like the same people, just older and younger. And speaking of that, they had to de-age the kids who play them as kids because they're getting older. They're more teenagers now. They had to drop their voices tones a little bit because they were starting to get to puberty. And there was a couple times I could tell, but only because I knew going in that it had happened. Other than that, you cannot tell. It just...
I was going to say maybe with the Ben character...
like his face looked a little bit shiny. Like
I was gonna say, yeah. I don't know if it was just
it looked off.
They made
a couple of times. The rest of it didn't. But there's a couple times just something stood out.
He definitely looked a lot thinner in this movie, but that was, I feel like that was probably what you said, the de-aging thing.
Yeah, he also got thinner in real life.
Yeah, and obviously, he gets in shape and he turns into this, it's like the ugly duckling story. Yes. That was the only time and the only child that I saw that I was like, just something didn't look right with his face. But when you mentioned that, I was like, that makes sense. That everything else, never would have known whatsoever that any of that would have been done, just for how well they went back and made sure you never felt like there was an actual jump in time as far as when you were watching these kids. In your head, like there was a couple years separated between filming. It just seemed like one continuous movie. And you mentioning too, like when they released the movie, it would be really cool if they just did an entire Blu-ray release, beginning to end. That's it. There's no disc 1, disc 2. I think that would be brilliant as well. Just for how well the movies were shot, to kind of give you that
full story,
full entire story.
Yeah.
The kids they go their separate ways. They come back 27 years later, and it's about remembering. Yeah. It's about never forgetting.
But yeah, just to have that one continued story, that'd be great. Movie worked really well. Acting worked really well. The story was great. The effects were good. There was a couple times when the CGI was a little bit off. But other than that, it worked. With so much computer-generated images today, you're bound to see something that your mind doesn't accept it being real. And that's just going to happen. In a lot of movies it happens. Some more than others. This one, there's a couple spots. But other than that, most of it looked great.
I do have to say there was a few areas in the movie that I felt maybe could have used a little more in-depth storytelling, maybe to explain what was going on. The part that really like just seemed random as hell to me was the scene when the bully guy with the mullet,
Oh yeah,
can't think of his name off the top of my head,
Mhm.
just pops out of nowhere and stabs what's his name in the face.
Yeah.
I don't know why. To me, it just felt like it was the most unnatural part of the movie. In the beginning, when you see him and you understand like what
Powers, yeah.
the hell, you know, the hell he's been through. He's been down there and been through all this with Pennywise, and he's obviously lost his mind. He's mentally just been just broken down. He's in this insane asylum.
Yeah.
All that makes sense. And then he's being driven around by this zombie of his best friend.
That's one thing I will say I agree with you on it.
And then that was it.
That was it. There was nothing else about it. Yeah.
You never found out like
Yeah.
what happened to him.
Yeah.
Nothing like that. And I kind of just felt like if you're gonna give me this storyline and you're gonna give me this character in the movie,
Give me a little bit more of it.
Because
yeah.
he-
It just
he
kind of
al-
went nowhere, yeah.
he tortured Ben. You know, he carved him. And then there was that awesome scene, you know, after the whole fact that he stabbed that guy in the face and he survived the whole being stabbed in the chest. And he's walking off and he's pulling the knife out and he looks up and he sees him and he's like, you know, making his little fat jokes and he kind of smiles and winks at him. And you're like, oh shit, this antagonist, you know, he's going to show up later in the movie like he did in the first one, you know, when they were going down to fight Pennywise. He kind of played this second villain. And you're getting that whole feeling the entire movie, and then he's just gone. I don't know. Like, to me, that just kind of felt odd, and it was one of those things. Like I said, the whole little scene where he stabs him in the face and then gets the knife, that felt so unnatural to me as a part of the story. And then he's being driven around by this zombie, his zombie character, and then that's it. I don't know. That was the one part that really got me as far as I wanted more, and I wanted to know what the hell was going on here, and what eventually down the road is he gonna play, and then you never get that.
Yeah.
It bothered me.
I believe in the miniseries version, he actually didn't have his zombie friend or whatever driving around, but they showed him a couple more times, like getting to Derry and following them around a little bit before he popped out. They showed him going in the hotel, and then you knew one of them was going to run into him eventually, but this came out, like you said, out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then he shows up in the library and attacks Mike, and then Richie hits him in the back of the head with the axe, and he's dead. And yeah, you're right. They could have dragged it a little bit more, but for what they were doing and where it was going, they couldn't have him anymore because it would have interfered with the rest of the larger story to get to the final battle.
Yeah.
But I think they should have done a little bit more with that. Had him pop up more than once and a little bit sooner in the movie. It could have been a little bit more. Yeah, that's probably my only big gripe with it, or gripe with this movie, is that aspect. I thought maybe there was another story thread that they had pulled on that they didn't really follow through with, as I was thinking that they did. Most of them they followed through on, and it led somewhere. This one didn't as much, and it kind of was just abrupt, and it was over.
And that shows you how much of an impact it really had on, because honestly, like, now that you mention that, the whole scene in the library when he did attack Mike, it didn't even, like, stick with me.
Yeah.
It really didn't.
Yeah, because it was just a
sudden, and that was another one of those, like, odd scare moments, you know, where there's so much dark area in the movie, and you know something's going to jump out at you. So you're thinking and you're expecting it's going to be Pennywise. He's, once again, you know, torturing and following these kids. And ended up being him.
Yeah, Powers.
I don't know, like, that just kind of makes me think back, like, how much of an impact really he kind of had in this storyline. At the very beginning, it was entertaining and it was great, but further on down the story and down the movie, you almost just forget about him.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, just that whole odd moment, he's having this weird, odd relationship with his now dead friend, you get nothing from it. But yeah, after you said that with the whole axe in the back of the head, I must have completely just
forgot about it.
Pushed that part out of my head. I really was so immersed in so much more of the story as far as with the kids and them gathering their artifacts and things of that nature that I felt like you know, they probably could have done without that. Now, granted that if it was in the book, then I'm totally for people following the book and the storyline as it was written, because when it happens with other movies and other comic book movies, I lose my absolute mind about it. So, more power to you.
Yeah. But everything worked really well for me. The scares worked. The performances were great. It was as good as Chapter 1 was. I knew this had to be a strong contender to be just as good, and I think it pulled it off. I think both films were on the same level. They worked really well, and to combine them as one story, if you put it together without end credits for the first one and without beginning credits for this one, it would just flow as one story and it would work really well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the biggest reasons I liked it, because I know it would just flow really well together, and it didn't feel like I was like, okay, here's the next part. It was like, no, we're just going to continue this story, because I did watch the Chapter 1 last night before this one, so I could kind of prepare, and it just felt like a continuation, going right back into it. Like it was like I had an long intermission and got back right into the story. It wasn't like, oh, I watched this movie and I'm watching this movie. It was like, it was just a continuation, one long story. And that's why it works so well. And I really, really enjoyed it. And as soon as the credits rolled, I was like, damn, that was really good. And
I noticed you kind of sat there for a minute.
Yeah, I was just like absorbing stuff.
You had to take it in.
Yeah.
You really did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the same way. I got towards the end of that movie and I kind of was just like, this needs to end. But it was also for the fact that it was getting kind of late and I was just kind of at that point where my mind was getting tired. I know this is a movie I could go back, I could watch multiple times, gain more from it. I'm sure there's a lot that I probably, diving deeper into the storyline, had missed. There's a lot more I'm sure that I can go back and pick up on. For what I was going in to see it for and expect, I got way more than I anticipated, definitely, which was just what I was hoping to be, like an entertaining horror movie. I don't want to be scared, but I knew that was what was going to happen, and it did it in such a way that it kind of just constantly kept me on the edge of my seat, waiting and knowing what was coming, but you never knew when.
Yeah.
And that's really all I cared about. After we had discussed that it was going to be like a 3-hour movie, I was like, this movie's going to have to keep me interested.
Has to keep me going,
Have to keep me interested for at least those almost 3 hours, or I'm just going to be like, I'm done. I'm completely done with this movie. Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it.
Yes.
And so if you were going to score this movie out of 10, what would be your score for this one?
I'm going to have to say I would probably score it a 7.5.
Jason's score is a 7.5 out of 10. I'd probably say an 8.5 out of 10 on this one. Yeah, putting them together as one story, I'd probably give it a 9 for the whole thing. But this one in separately is an 8.5 out of 10 for me here on the Geek Blend. We both really enjoyed this movie. It kept us both going. We definitely recommend checking it out.
Oh,
if you have an IMAX theater, we always recommend that. That's what we decided to do. We saw an IMAX. Didn't have the IMAX 3D because it seems like we're not getting those anymore around here, but we still enjoyed it. We'd like the bigger screen, the larger sound, and it works better. That's our thing. IMAX is where it's at. So
in IMAX, Showplace, cinemas, if you were to ever hear this,
redo your auditorium.
Please.
Make it bigger. It's too cramped.
I hate the fact that I feel like I'm sitting on the people that are next to me.
No shit.
There's literally no room at all to enjoy the movie when you feel like you are on a 747 flight to Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
Cramped like this.
Like, is this your first flight?
Is this my armrest? Can I put my Coke here?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
Where do I lay my nachos?
I almost grabbed the guy next to me's drink multiple times.
I picked your drink up twice and then was like, oh shit, this isn't my drink.
Yeah.
Man, I love the IMAX experience and that screen and that sound, and the way that an IMAX can immerse you into a movie is light years beyond any other movie experience that I've had. And anytime you ever tell me we're going to go see a movie, I'm always like, let's just go see it in IMAX. But it's the one thing that literally ruins that entire experience for me, especially if we go to see it like on an opening night.
Yeah. And it's
thank God we went and seen this tonight. It kind of cracked me up. I went on our bathroom break came back up the stairs, and it was like the entire theater was just split in half with just a row of people and nobody on the outside.
So it was like all down the middle?
Because we could have literally spread out and everybody could have like not been sitting on top of each other and enjoyed it, but because you buy your seat ahead of time and you're kind of reserved to that seat, you almost don't want to move because you're afraid, like, during the movie, if somebody's going to show up and be like, what are you doing in my seat?
Like, what are you doing here 2 hours late?
Yeah. But at the same time, it cracks me up because that is like the perfect area of seating, but I feel like if you spread that out, no matter where you're sitting, you're going to be able to enjoy that movie. But that's just my little rant for this review, because it had nothing to do with the movie.
Don't matter.
But it's a negative point.
It's a negative experience on our impact of the film, yeah.
It very much so is.
Yeah. So if Showplay Cinemas, you're watching this, redo your IMAX auditorium.
Take you like a month.
Seriously, just shut it down, redo it, and reopen it.
It's not like you're going to miss the money. It's not like you're going to miss out on anything as far as showing, because half the time when they get really good movies and they put them in IMAX, you do 2 showings and they're so damn late at night.
Yeah.
Nobody even cares.
I know.
Plus the fact that we walked in there and it was so dark, I felt like Pennywise himself was going to jump out from underneath.
They forgot to turn the lights on in there, yeah.
Yeah, and eat my kneecaps or something. I could go on all night about it. We're reviewing a movie, not Showplay Cinemas. That might be for another one.
We might do that, yeah.
Yeah, we might have to light into your ass later on down the road. Anyway, that was the review. An amazing movie. Yeah. Once again, any horror movie that I can give a 2 thumbs up to and a score like that, for me, is a winner. I can't speak for him or any of you guys out there that, go out to the movies and want to watch horror movies, but it takes a lot to drag me to go see one, so I highly recommend this one. Definitely go recommend it.
Full show.
Yeah.
That's our review. As always, I'm Jeff.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And as always, remember,
if you geek about it, we'll speak about it.
See you guys next time.
Have a good one, guys.
Later.
Thank you.